Hi guys, so today I'm going to show you how to paint a dropzone commander UCM albatross. Now you don't need very many paints for this, and you can also use this technique on your other UCM or various other model systems or models you wish to use it for. Okay, first off, I've primed the model with Tamiya Grey Primer. As you can see, it's all over. With the dropzone commander resin, there's not a great deal of difference in the colour, so just be careful when you're priming it that you actually have covered it all in grey primer. Okay, so now we're going to start off with our base coat, which is Vallejo Model Air Yellow Olive. It's a little bit misleading because the word yellow, this is actually a green paint. Just brush it on. As you can see, I'm brushing it on quite lightly at first, and as I'm getting a little bit more impatient, I'll start laying it down a little bit thicker. Try not to let the paint pool if you can, because otherwise you'll get blotchy areas, so you still want to get it as matte as you can, although you can layer this down a little bit heavier than the rest. As you can see there as well, my thumb was in the way, so watch out when you're holding the model as well. Make sure wherever your fingers are that are holding it, make sure you spray those as well. It's best to try and hold the model with as little points of your hand as possible, so just the tips of your fingers would work better. Also as well, what you see right now is the fact that I'm going back over it from a different angle. With an airbrush, obviously the angle of the airbrush is where the paint will hit. If you turn the model around as you're spraying, you'll find out some of the areas won't get hit by the paint. So you want to make sure you keep continually spin it around and cover all the areas where the paint hasn't hit the model. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the banding. I'm going to use Administratum Grey from Games Workshop, however, Vallejo Model Air Light Grey works just as well, if not better, due to the fact that I didn't have any in stock, that I had to go for a substitute. So this is thinned down with Tamiya X20A thinner. So all we're going to do here is just do some stripes and try and keep your hand in a line. As you saw at the beginning, it went a little bit wiggly, but you can correct it by making thicker bands. So when you've also done this and you've created all the bands, have a look at it. You'll see here that I haven't got that quite right. The bands are a different sort of angle to each other. So to compensate for that, I'm just going to make the bands a bit thicker, and it should all line itself up properly. Okay, so we're now going to move on to a bit of a time-consuming part. This is the metal part. So I'm using Games Workshop chainmail here. However, any sort of gunmetal, standard metal colour will suffice for this. It doesn't have to be a particular tone or anything like that. If you want a darker tone, go for a darker gunmetal or lead belcher or so forth. But by all means, there's no real rules here. You could even set it to a brass colour if you wish to, depending on your colour scheme. try and make sure as well that you put down a relatively thick coat and make sure it's going into all the cracks and crevices as well. It's not the end of the world if it doesn't, because the next coat will get into all the cracks and crevices. So now we're going to move on to the wash. Now we're going to use non-oil by Citadel, i.e. Games Workshop, for this. You're going to want a fair amount of this, okay, because you're going to coat the entire model in this. So grab a relatively large brush. A wash brush is quite good. The Games Workshop one is actually surprisingly good. So grab that and just coat the model in this. Try not to let it pull too much on the green areas. It doesn't matter so much on the metal, but you do definitely want it to get in all the little cracks and fill up all the little gaps, because this will bring the whole model to life. All the little detail which you can't usually see will suddenly all start to pop out. Also as well, you particularly want to pay attention to the underside of these gunships. This is where the most detail is. A bit of irony, because it's probably the place where most people won't see. But make sure you give this a good coating, because there's lots of tiny little cracks and crevices that the wash needs to go into. So just spend a little bit longer on it. If it pulls a bit too much in some areas, take it from that with a brush and put it onto another area. Don't make sure it doesn't pull too much. But at the same time, you definitely want to sort of coat this. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to paint the thrusters. Now we're going to do that using ice blue. Hoeth blue will suffice as a substitute, but any light blue doesn't really matter too much. And all you want to do is paint very finely the thrusters side of things. A smart person would have masked this off beforehand, and I would probably advise doing it if you have the time, but I was in a bit of a rush, I guess. So just be careful with it. If you're not going to mask it off, it can go over onto other parts of the model, so just be careful at this point. Okay, so what we're going to use now is a white. Okay, so we're going to put this in the airbrush again, but this time we're just going to dust on the white. Okay, and we're not going to go right to the edges. We're going to aim for the center, going outwards and fading outwards, very much like the front cover of the Dropzone Commander book. Okay, so we're now going to move on to the cockpit side of things. So we're just going to take a black colour. I'm using Vallejo Model Air because it's a bit rather thinner paint. However, any black paint will suffice. So you just need to paint in the window panes. Try not to paint the actual bars themselves because we're going to use that. And then also bring out a bit of a definition between the cockpit panes and the bars that are holding them there. Now we're going to use Caldor Sky, and what we're going to do is paint this in the top left hand corner, basically covering nearly half of the square. Okay, we're now going to go back to using our ice blue. We're going to do the same again. We're going to make it much smaller, so we're not going to go for half the square. We're just going to go for a line from the top and the side. And now we're going to move on to the last bit, which is a dab of white. And this is just going to be in the very corner, and it's going to be more like a spot. Okay, now the finishing touch, we're going to use some Tamiya clear blue, and we're just going to go all the way over the top of all those windows panes. There we go, it blends all the colours together. Okay, so what I'm doing now is I noticed that the oil didn't go into all the cracks and crevices, so I'm just going to touch it up by putting some more normal oil where I believe the paint didn't go in properly. And here is the finished result. Thanks for watching the vid, guys. Hope you liked it. Now please remember, this is just my way of painting models. This isn't a rule, you can do it any way you like. This is just to give you a little bit of a helping hand. Please let me know what you think by either commenting, rating and subscribing. And if you've got any other ideas for any other vids, please let me know and I'll see what I can put together for you. Okay, thanks again guys, catch you in a bit.